Maritime Made is presented by Nova Scotia Business Inc., helping to educate, inform, and celebrate our region's manufacturing successes, because great things are happening in all of our communities.
At Fox's Folly Fine Woodworking in Hubbards, Nova Scotia, self-taught woodworker David McMillan works with beautiful exotic as well as local raw wood and transforms it into delightful, practical works of art. Every piece starts as an air-dried log that is stored outside to prevent splitting. To begin, David selects an American elm log from a nearby tree fall. Using a chainsaw, the ends of the log are cut off. Then, using a level, cut lines are made, and he begins to square off the log. This piece of wood will be a bowl. The cutting exposes the wood in the center of the log, called the heartwood. Using a compass, the woodworker marks out the center of the log. Then, on the bandsaw, he begins to cut out the rough circular shapes for bowls, slowly guiding the blade along the cut line markings. At this stage, these are called blanks.
Using a drill press, a small mounting hole is made in order to mount the blank to the lathe. A supportive arm called a banjo is moved into place, and the base of the bowl, called the foot, is marked. As the lathe spins the wood, the woodworker begins to work the bowl using a 1-inch scraper. Skillfully pressing the scraper in various ways, the foot of the bowl starts to take shape. This technique of using various tools against the wood while it spins on a lathe is called wood turning. Stopping to sharpen the scraper on the grinder, the woodworker needs his tools to be razor sharp throughout the turning process. Then, the wood turning continues. Next, using a different scraper, the foot of the bowl is shaped further. Then he begins to shape the outer sides of the bowl. Shutting off the lathe periodically throughout the process allows the woodworker to check on progress and make more adjustments as he continues working.
A mark is made on the bottom for a tenon. The tenon is a temporary foot that will be removed later in the production process. Now it's time to remove the bowl and change the chuck on the lathe. The bowl is put back on with the temporary footing clamped in place. The woodworker finds the center of the bowl and starts back to work with the gouge, scooping out the center of the bowl. Gentle movements create the edge or trim. It's starting to look like a bowl. Next, a different chuck is used and the bowl is clamped in place. This one is called a coal chuck. The lathe is slowed from 2100 RPM to 600 RPM for this finer work. The bottom of the foot is shaped slightly concave so it won't wobble on surfaces. The gouge tool is used, and a straight edge is used to verify the concave shape. Once the turning is complete, the bowl is placed in a paper bag with wood shaving and allowed to dry out slowly over 6 months. This helps ensure the wood won't crack or dry out too quickly. After the drying period, it's time for sanding. Starting with 120 grit sandpaper and working all the way to 220 grit paper, the woodworker is carefully moving back and forth, trying not to create too much heat in one spot. He also changes direction of the lathe periodically to raise more of the grain for a smoother finish.
Finishing techniques vary in woodworking. An ebonizer technique uses steel wool dissolved in vinegar. When it's brushed on the wood, it turns the wood to a dark color of ebony, a rare and threatened wood species. Ebonizing gives the look of ebony using woods that are far more readily available. 3 coats with drying in between creates this beautiful look. Many pieces are given a wax finish. It's massaged into the wood evenly all around. This wax is a blend of local beeswax and mineral oil. After sitting overnight, the bowl is buffed to a beautiful finish. Making a rolling pin begins with a long rectangular block or blank. The blanks are coated with their type of wood: ash, maple, elm. The lathe is set up a little differently for turning rolling pins. Paraffin wax is applied to the runners. Then, the alignment of the 2 ends of the lathe is checked and adjusted. The blank is then selected. This is Brazilian cherry wood. Setting it down on a centering device, the woodworker hammers down on the exposed end, marking the center on the other end. The spur drive is tapped in place on the headstock end. Then the tailstock end is carefully centered. Guide markings help the woodworker stay on track with his design as he works. These marks are 3/8 of an inch all the way around the blank on both ends. The waistline is also marked. Then the center. With a sharp 2-inch roughing gouge, the wood turning begins. While the lathe turns at 2100 RPM, the woodworker applies a light, even pressure to create the body of the rolling pin. Stopping the lathe and moving the banjo arm down, he turns the other end.
This is a French rolling pin, which is wider in the center. After setting measurements on calipers, he checks the size of the ends of the rolling pin. Back to the roughing gouge, the middle of the piece is turned further. Then, guidelines are marked where the center of the pin will be thicker. Using a sharpened skew chisel, it's back to work on the middle of the rolling pin. Stopping the lathe to check progress, he measures the thickness at the center of the rolling pin and decides on the size of the taper. Then works the rolling pin further with the skew chisel until it's just right. For beautifully finished ends, a parting tool is used to make a clean cut on both ends. After some fine sanding with many different grit papers, the rolling pin is finished. Unlike the fresh or green wood that was used for the bowl, this is very hard, kiln-dried wood and can be waxed right away to a beautiful finish. Once the products are complete, it's off to the local market, where customers from around the world can purchase bowls, spoons, rolling pins, and many other beautiful pieces of woodwork.